And once again, a very big welcome to all of our attendees this morning. I hope that you managed to get the last week's Toolbox talk on Legionella. What is it? Just to explain what is the bacteria that we are briefly speaking about this morning. And then if you are available for the next 2 weeks, how can it be prevented? Will be broadcast next week, Tuesday. And then finally, at the end of the month, for the last Toolbox talk, we will just recap with the presentation. It is preventable, but there are certain things that we must do in order to ensure a stable program of Legionnaires disease prevention. The bacteria will always be there, but what we want to do is ensure that we are not infected or even affected in our plumbing due to this current bacteria that we are facing. So we hope that all of you are still doing well during the lockdown time. We know that it's coming to the last stretch of the week for the initial lockdown that we've had. We realize that there is a bit of an extension, and we do hope that many of you will be able to get back to normal working situations pretty soon. For those who are working at home, thank you very much for what you're doing, especially those who have to go out during this time as an essential service and expose yourself out there. We do appreciate, and we want to say a very big thank you to all of you. So this morning's Toolbox talk, as it says there, how does it spread? One of the things that we want to just remember is if we understand how Legionnaires bacteria moves and gets into our homes, into our offices, into our water systems, we can then start putting in a plan to prevent it from becoming a dangerous situation. And this is really the start of a risk assessment. And we'll discuss, and I'll explain to you what should be in a risk assessment. But right at the end, on the 28th of April, when we do recap it, we will be giving you a document that will have the outline of a risk assessment that you need to do. Now, for those of you who are in health and safety, or those of you who understand how a risk assessment works, this is not a construction risk assessment where we have a task, a hazard, the risks that are identified, and then we look at the risk matrix to see what are the impacts and aspects, whether it comes to environmental, health, or even safety. It is a different type of risk assessment. It is an assessment of our entire, how can we put it, plumbing within the area of where we are working, or the plumbing that we currently own, either in our homes, at our offices, or the plumbing that we are installing at clients. And this is a general overview of what the risk rating is, prioritizing cleanliness as well as constant monthly, quarterly, and annual checks and inspections. So it's a different type of risk assessment that you are used to, but very quickly you'll understand how it works. Legionnaires bacteria, though, is spread because it feeds off scale, sediment, algae, rust, sludge, and organic matter, all of which are found in and around plumbing and plumbing works. Now, why is this? Well, for one, it's very difficult to get inside the piping once it's been installed. And depending on the type of water that we are using, scale or sediment will start being forced into the plumbing works, and it will start building up. It will start settling onto the plumbing, and especially around the joining areas. So if your plumber understands how to do the plumbing and he's doing it very well, the joins will be nice and smooth. The little legs and the T crossbars, all of those little extras that they're putting in, these won't have very big areas for things to get caught on. And one of the ways we can explain this is when a pipe has water flowing through it, sediment can be caught on any area where there's a ridge or a gap, and this is where it starts building up. And maybe the plumbers out there, if you have a bit better of an explanation of how this works, we would love you to please send us that information, even if you have some information on this. And this build up, what it does is it eventually just continues, and this is oftentimes where we get blockages. Not often where it's the influx of the water. A lot of the time it's where we are flushing water out, because then a lot of solid matter is going with that as well. But algae and rust obviously affect all plumbing from start to finish, especially when we have steel tubing or piping, or when we are using big containers, and then obviously at the end points when you have the shower heads and the taps. If it's not cleaned and maintained and looked after, this can start accumulating, and the Legionnaire bacteria loves to thrive on scale, algae, sludge, etc. Now, Legionnaire's disease that comes from the Legionnaire bacteria is contracted by inhalation of water droplets that contain this bacteria. So how does it actually work? Let's explain the water droplets. Bacteria is caught in the water. Now, as we mentioned last week, this Legionella bacteria is naturally found, it's naturally occurring in soil and water in and around our environment. So it's always there. But this is now caught and then released into the air when the water is aspirated, or as soon as it creates water vapor. These droplets then are able to be inhaled into the actual lungs. So remember, there's a pipe that goes into the stomach. So when you eat food, it's obviously not going into your lungs, it's going into your stomach. But sometimes it goes down the wrong pipe, as it were. And then you start coughing, and sometimes you just need to bring up that food because maybe the windpipe has opened up and it has allowed something through, an object that shouldn't have gone through. And this now becomes a bit of an obstruction. This could happen when swallowing water. Sometimes when you're in a pool, you swallow a little bit of water, and it can go down the wrong pipe and you can get it into your lungs. Very, very dangerous. A lot of people have drowned because of this happening. But Legionnaire's disease, or the bacteria specifically from Legionella, is inhaled through these water droplets. So you can now see where this will occur. When you are showering, if the bacteria is in the water and you have created the right environment for that bacteria to thrive, as soon as the water is forced out of the shower's head, that generally gives it a little bit of aspiration, or it fills it with oxygen. And this now allows it to be inhaled into the lungs. Oftentimes, it's good to inhale steam, especially when you have a bit of a chest condition, a respiratory condition. They say inhalation of steam, maybe putting in a few other remedies or cures that you might have gotten from your doctor, to breathe into the lungs and slowly breathe it out. I know Vicks obviously does the same thing. It creates a vapor rub, and this vapor then is inhaled. Now, this is exactly how this bacteria, the Legionella bacteria, is inhaled into one's chest. You can find this by spas. Now, a spa generally is kept at a temperature that is nice and warm for you to get in, so that it is at an optimal temperature for a person to enjoy that little spa bath, the same as a jacuzzi. However, if it is at the right temperature, between 20 and 45 degrees Celsius, this is where that Legionella bacteria will continue to thrive. Water features as well. The heat of the sun will allow this water feature, or the piping, to obviously increase in temperature. And now it's not getting to between 50 and 60 degrees Celsius, so it's not destroying that bacteria, and it is allowing this bacteria to start forming and growing and multiplying right at that 20 to 45 degrees Celsius point. And then when the water feature is turned on, the water is aspirated as it comes out of the water feature. And this then goes into the environment, or into the atmosphere where we are, and there is a possibility of inhaling that into your lungs. The same with natural water springs, steam rooms, or even at end user taps. Some taps, especially like those used in kitchens, industrial kitchens for cleaning, they've obviously got this little adapter that goes onto the end of the tap, and it is pulled around in the kitchen to clean things, to wash things off, perhaps even there by the dishes side. And you want to keep the water at a nice, good condition in order to clean. But oftentimes, we don't check the temperature. All we're checking is the amount of water we have. And what we want to do here is just educate everyone to understand. Make sure you also inspect the temperatures. Make sure you also inspect how good the quality of water is and the cleanliness of where the water is being kept. So this is where we are getting it from, and this is how it is spreading in and around from our homes to our offices to our working environment. And obviously, as a plumber, you're exposed to all of these areas since you are doing plumbing and pipe work in most of these environments. So yes, you might be working on piping that doesn't have water in it at the moment, but when you are testing these things or going out to do inspections, just remember and be cautious of the fact that you are exposing yourself to the Legionella bacteria as well. Now let's see how this actually works. Well, if you take a look at your screens, if you can see it, you will notice that we have the lungs of a person here, and the little blow up on the top right hand corner is the alveoli. Now that is the cell that is responsible for removing dust or dust particles. And that little cell, which is attached to the chest, if we breathe in something that is foreign or should not be inhaled, sometimes it's like pollen or whatever it is in the air or in the environment that we are breathing in, that attaches to the lungs, and these cells are responsible for removing them out of the body. Now, this cell is exactly where the Legionella bacteria is going to attach to, because these cells are the very first line of defense before attaching or attracting it into the lungs. Now, there you'll notice on the bottom, that is the bacteria that you see there. Obviously, this is not in scale, so we're not saying that is the size of the bacteria compared to the person. It's just to explain how it actually works. This Legionella bacteria now starts off, let's say, as 3 cells. It then creates a little protective vacuole. Now, this is a little sac around the bacteria, and this keeps it safe from those cells that destroy foreign objects in the lungs. And once the bacteria continues to multiply and increase in strength and obviously in size, this bacteria then has multiplied to the point of where it can destroy this protective sac that is obviously going against the defenses of your body, and it can now destroy that cell or those little particles of cells that are attached to our lungs. And as the bacteria destroys the cells, it then attaches deeper and deeper into the lungs. Now, as we mentioned last week, you obviously have that pneumonia-like symptom where it's attached to the lungs, and then you get pneumonia, or if it's attached to both lungs, you will get double pneumonia. And it is just as deadly as pneumonia. Now, we will say at the end, if you are not showing signs and symptoms of this, please just remember you are going to be okay. As we mentioned last week, it may affect you as Pontiac fever, which is like the common cold, and it has the same type of symptoms as the common cold. So please just be aware that this is an awareness program of this bacteria, and we are just trying to introduce you into a better way or a better form of understanding, knowing that plumbing is extremely important. Having a plumber, especially a qualified plumber who understands how this works and the risks and hazards to us as an end user, is also vitally important, because they can guide and assist you in order to prevent this type of bacteria from eventually growing and becoming a possibility for a Legionnaire's disease in your homes and in your offices. So remember, first of all, the bacteria will invade those alveolar macrophages inside the actual lungs. These cells, obviously, that are responsible for removing the dust will be destroyed by the bacteria as soon as it multiplies. So the longer we continue to use a shower head, a water feature, a day spa that has this bacteria in, the more and more we are going to be at risk. So monthly, quarterly, and annual inspections are extremely important. And that's why we have a question for you today. When last was it inspected, and who is inspecting your plumbing? Remember, we mentioned a risk assessment. Now, it's very different from a construction risk assessment, as we mentioned, and we will be sending out the contents and a basic outline of what a risk assessment should look like. So for those of you who are plumbers, we'll send it out to you as well, especially if you are IOPSA members. But if you do want to ensure that you get it, you can just drop me a mail if you've got my email address. If you don't, at the end of this webinar, I will read it out to you again. If you are a health and safety professional and you are also listening in just to understand what Legionnaires bacteria or Legionella bacteria is, we encourage you to also reach out, and we will send you these contents at the end of the month also of what a risk assessment for Legionella bacteria should look like. And then you can also assist your plumbers. Perhaps they are not listening in today, and you can give them this risk assessment to fill out, or perhaps you can do it for your own offices as well. Now, since Legionella bacteria is a naturally occurring bacteria around us, we need to ensure that we have a Legionella plan. And this is to prevent the growth, spread, and contamination of this bacteria. So things like water temperatures. Is it above that 50 degrees Celsius mark? And is it there for a good amount of time in order to destroy the bacteria that is in that water? A minimum of 2 to 4 hours during the day. As we mentioned earlier, between that 20 to 45 degree mark is the optimal conditions for this bacteria to grow. Then we are looking at things like cleanliness of the source of our water, cleanliness of the actual plumbing that we have installed, and then cleanliness of all end points, taps, showers, nozzles, water features, anything where the water is coming out of for us to use or for us to look at. Then, are we doing disinfections? And this can be done in our own private homes as well. The shower head that we are using, is it being disinfected? Are we cleaning it regularly? Are we ensuring that no sediment, buildup, algae, or even rust is being accumulated on these endpoints? And then, which will be touched base on in the risk assessment, are your monthly inspections that need to be done. And fortunately, this can be done by you yourself. It doesn't have to be calling out a plumber every month to do these inspections. But if you have a regular plan of monthly inspections, you could do this yourself. But we do suggest that you get a plan in place so that the plumber can come out quarterly and annually to do his inspections. Quarterly inspections will be vitally important. They will check on your monthly inspections, and then every quarter they will check at the temperatures and the endpoints, obviously the closest pipe or the closest tap to where the water source is, and the furthest tap on that line of water as well. We must understand that the closest tap might be a lot warmer when it comes to the water that we are using. But as we go down the line, further down the plumbing, depending on how far that endpoint is, we might have a drop in temperature. And if it's at a regular time and a regular stand of temperature all the time, there might be where the risk assessment will say we have an issue of water down at the end point of where that plumbing is going. So this is to ensure that every user of the plumbing is kept safe from this potential illness. So do you know the contents of what your risk assessment should be? Have you got a risk assessment in place? Because it should have an introduction, a preface, a summary of the entire site, a full management structure, in other words, an organogram of who is responsible to take ownership of this risk assessment. And then a scheme of control, corrective actions, the asset registry, all the plumbing assets in and around the entire building, a full water system survey with the risk assessment, and then a system schematic as well. So there are 10 points or 10 contents that should be in this risk assessment. If you want a copy of this, please tune in for the last Toolbox talk on the 28th of April, and we will ensure that we do have it on the system for you to download, or if you do email us, we will send you a copy as well. So who is at risk of the Legionella bacteria potentially becoming Pontiac fever or Legionnaire's disease, where it becomes that pneumonia-like illness? Well, everyone is a potential victim of this disease, but certain ones are more at risk. So if you are a smoker, a male aged over 45, a heavy drinker, an impaired immune system person, or even a chronic respiratory problem person, then you are more likely to catch this disease. So please ensure you have your medical surveillances in place for yourself and your plumbers. When we send them out, we want to ensure that they are not only kept safe while on site, and this is what these toolbox talks are really about, is health and safety on site. But often we say health and safety, but generally we really look after the safety of the person. Don't forget the health side of it. We want to ensure that not only are you kept protected on the risks and hazards on the site, but that you come out of that job and go home healthy as well, and not really spreading these things to your family. Now, we had two questions last week, and we just want to answer them very, very quickly, just for everybody to be aware of that. Is the Legionnaires disease or Pontiac's fever contagious? No, it is not like normal flu or even COVID-19. It is not contagious from person to person. This is a waterborne disease that, when it attaches to your lungs, will only give you the signs and symptoms either of Pontiac's fever or Legionnaire's disease. Now, how long will it take you to get well? Well, there is antibiotic treatment that is usually effective in treating Legionnaire's disease. And what is the good news is, if you do contract Legionnaire's disease and you are aware of what you are facing and you have the signs and symptoms of this pneumonia-like illness, 90% of people will make a full recovery. So if you do start feeling better after a few days, just remember this type of illness can take up to a few weeks until you are completely back to normal. And obviously, it is very common during this period of time to feel tired. Obviously, because it is a respiratory condition, it attacks the lungs, it is going to make you feel tired. So just maybe monitor yourself. If this has happened, take off the recommended amount of time from your doctors. And please, we are not medical professionals. If you have the signs and symptoms of any disease, do not phone us. Immediately go to your doctor, go to your physician, go to your house doctor, and go and speak to them. They are medically fit to ensure that they can keep you healthy and safe. This is just an awareness program from ourselves. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. We don't want to take too much more of your time. We'd like to leave some time if there are any questions after this. But just as a special announcement and a reminder, once again, all courses that are sponsored by IOPSA, as well as PRB CPD eligible, is now being cancelled or postponed until further notice. So if you do still want to join these courses from KZN, Western Cape, Southern Cape, Eastern Cape, Gauteng, the Vaal area, as well as Potchefstroom, please get in touch with us. We will put your names down on the calendar for the rest of the year. And if you need any help, please reach out to us on safety@iopsa.org or info@ohss.co.za. Once again, we would like to say thank you very much for joining our Toolbox Talk this morning. We look forward to next week. How can it be prevented? What are we doing to ensure that this bacteria is not growing in our plumbing? So thank you very much to all who joined us this morning.